Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking on basically the single most intimidating age-old question in human history. I mean, the meaning of life.
Yeah, just a small, easy topic for today.
Right, exactly. Super casual. But we are grounding this entire conversation in a very specific, highly provocative, translated essay from July 2024. It's by an author named Deiform Buddha, and it's simply titled The Meaning of Life.
And, our mission for this deep dive is to explore a framework that radically challenges that default modern assumption we all have. The idea that we as humans are just entirely in charge of creating our own purpose.
Exactly.
Because it is a profound shift in perspective. I mean, we spend so much time culturally obsessing over how to find our passion or build our legacy. We just assume the power lies entirely in our own hands.
Oh, 100%. We're totally obsessed with it.
Right. But this philosophy strips all of that away. It asks us to look at the very mechanics of existence from a completely different vantage point.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really get into this mindset, I want to pose a scenario directly to you, the listener. Imagine you're handed a strange, incredibly complex tool. It's heavy, it's got buttons, levers, intricate gears, blinking lights, but there's absolutely no manual.
Just a complete mystery box.
Exactly, nothing at all. You can press the buttons, you can watch the gears spin, measure the energy output, but you have no earthly idea what the machine is actually supposed to accomplish. So the question is, can the tool itself ever figure out what it's supposed to be used for by just, like, analyzing its own gears? Or do you ultimately have to ask the inventor who designed it?
That is the perfect entry point, really, because if you were somehow able to ask that tool what its purpose is, it might just say, well, my purpose is to blink my lights and spin my gears as efficiently as possible.
Right, because that's all it knows.
Exactly. That is the absolute limit of its reality. But the inventor knows that machine is actually, say, a calibration device for a deep space engine. Yeah. The tool's perspective is inherently, permanently limited by the boundaries of its own design. It just cannot perceive the spaceship.
Which really makes you wonder if our entire concept of self-actualization is just us spinning our gears, thinking we're doing something profound.
Yeah, that's a humbling thought.
It is. Because when you look at the digital age, especially online, people basically fall into two massive camps when discussing the meaning of life. The first camp is pure hyper-pragmatism, or really nihilism.
Right, the idea that life has no ultimate grand meaning at all.
Exactly. We are just biological machines, highly evolved apes on a floating rock, and we work hard simply to secure resources and stay alive.
Pure survival mechanics.
Yeah.
And then you have the second camp, which is undeniably the dominant philosophy in modern self-help and culture.
The self-made meaning camp.
Yes, the belief that meaning is entirely self-defined. The idea that the universe is just a blank canvas, and whatever meaning you assign to your life, whether that's raising a family, creating revolutionary art, building a massive business that becomes its true objective meaning.
And, I mean, that sounds incredibly empowering. It feels like ultimate freedom, like we get to write our own job description for the universe.
It does feel good, yeah.
But under the framework we are exploring today, that idea isn't just wrong, it's almost comical.
What's fascinating here is the author's emotional reaction to these modern viewpoints. They aren't writing from a place of anger or frustration, They state that watching people fiercely debate the meaning of life online actually amuses them.
Amuses them?
Yeah.
That's a bit condescending.
It is, yeah. It's the profound amusement of an adult watching a toddler passionately pretend to drive a stationary toy car. To counter this, the philosophy introduces a rigid, unbreakable law of the universe.
And this is the core of the whole essay, right?
Exactly. The rule is that the meaning of a lower-level life form is always defined by a higher-level life form. It is never, under any circumstances, defined by the life form itself.
So it's a strict hierarchy. Wait, but isn't defining our own meaning the ultimate human freedom? If this is true, we aren't the CEO writing the overarching company mission statement. We are just lowly employees on the factory floor, tightening bolts, trying to guess what the CEO actually wants from us based on, like, the shape of the wrench.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. True meaning flows exclusively downward. It moves from the creator to the created, from the higher order of complexity to the lower order.
So the factory worker's personal job description doesn't really matter to the final product.
Not at all. A self-written job description by the worker has absolutely no bearing on the actual product being manufactured.
To prove why that job description must come from the boss, this framework relies on some intensely vivid, everyday analogies that force us to look at the world differently.
Right, the animal analogies are wild.
Yeah, take a piglet. A little piglet turning to its mother and asking, Mom, what is the meaning of a pig's life? Or a dog sitting in a yard pondering its existence? Or, my favorite, a tired cow, physically exhausted from plowing a massive field, looking at the cow next to it and asking, what is the point of all this pulling?
The visual of animals having a deeply human existential crisis really highlights the absurdity of the premise.
Yep.
Because do pigs, dogs, and cows actually know the meaning of their lives? The framework dictates an absolute no.
Right.
To that exhausted cow, the meaning of life might seem to be the immediate sensory reality, pulling a heavy piece of wood through wet mud until its muscles give out just to earn a meal. To the dog, meaning might be barking at strangers to guard territory.
But that's just their limited perspective.
Exactly. Their true meaning, the actual reason they are bred, sheltered, and utilized, exists in a dimension they literally cannot access. It is known only to humans.
Because we are the higher level life form that placed the yoke on the cow's neck. The cow thinks it's just surviving, but we know it's a critical gear in the engine of agriculture.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't just a quirky observation about farm animals. It is establishing a universal structural law. And it goes far beyond biological creatures.
Like the crops, right?
Yes. We plant wheat, rice, and vegetables. We understand their immense value. They literally sustain human civilization, fuel our cities, power our economies. But a stalk of wheat has absolutely no conceptual awareness that it is part of a global food supply chain.
It's just doing what wheat does.
Right. And the philosophy then extends this exact same logic to artificial creations, using the example of a mobile phone.
Which, I have to say, comparing a cow to a smartphone is such a strange, jarring leap. But it makes an incredible amount of sense when you actually break it down.
It does, because the phone itself has no idea what it is. It processes billions of calculations a second. It connects global communications. But it only possesses that purpose because the human engineer who created it knows the purpose.
Well, yeah.
By grouping biological life like livestock and crops into the exact same category as a piece of technology relative to humans, we see that ignorance is not a bug. Being entirely oblivious to your ultimate purpose is a structural feature of occupying a lower rung on the existential ladder.
And that structural feature brings us to what I think is easily the most haunting line in this entire deep dive. When analyzing the piglet, the text drops this incredibly dark thought. Quote, if pigs were born knowing that they would eventually be slaughtered, how could they live their lives?
Yeah, that part is heavy.
I really want you, the listener, to sit with the immense weight of that idea. Does this imply that ignorance isn't simply a lack of intelligence or brain capacity? Is ignorance actually an intentional, necessary survival mechanism designed by the higher powers so the lower levels don't just, break down?
That is the chilling implication at the heart of this hierarchy. If that pig possessed the cognitive awareness to understand human agriculture, if it could mentally project itself down the timeline and perceive the slaughterhouse, the psychological terror would be totally paralyzing.
It would just shut down.
Exactly. It wouldn't eat, it wouldn't grow, it wouldn't fulfill the precise biological function the higher level life form designed it for.
The whole system would completely collapse.
Yeah.
The tired cow has to believe its immediate struggle in the mud is just the natural state of the world, rather than understanding it as merely a biological tractor generating human crop yields.
Precisely. The ignorance is a protective bubble. The overarching architecture of reality must remain hidden from the lower tier, otherwise the lower tier ceases to function.
So if animals, crops, and microchips are entirely oblivious to the grand plans of their human masters, because they literally have to be blind to keep the system running, then pure logic dictates we have to look upward. We have to turn that same uncomfortable spotlight on ourselves and ask, where do human beings sit on this ladder?
This raises an important question because this framework vehemently denies humanity the top spot. We are not the pinnacle of existence. The inevitable, unavoidable conclusion of this hierarchy is that humans absolutely cannot know the meaning of human life.
We're basically the phone.
Yes. Just like the pulling cow, just like the stalk of wheat, just like the blinking mobile phone, we are structurally incapable of defining our own existence.
Which means all of our modern self-defined purposes, building empires, writing symphonies, finding happiness, are just the equivalent of the dog thinking its purpose is to bark at the mailman. It's an illusion.
It is a localized illusion based on our very limited sensory inputs. To understand the actual meaning of human life, we must ask the higher level life forms that, quote, created and manage humans. And we really have to pay very close attention to the specific word choice there. created and manage.
Yeah, the word manage feels incredibly loaded. It completely changes the dynamic of a creator.
It fundamentally alters the relationship. This is aggressively rejecting the clockmaker theory of the universe.
Oh, right, the old philosophical idea where a divine creator builds the world, winds it up like a pocket watch, and just walks away to let it tick on its own in the void.
Exactly. Manage implies active, ongoing oversight. It implies cultivation, intervention, and harvesting. We are framed as a managed asset, so we are forced to ask ourselves, how do we relate to this unseen management level? Are we their wheat? Are we their plow cows?
What cosmic field are humanity's collective actions plowing without us even realizing it?
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want you to take that tired cow analogy and map it directly onto your own daily life. Think about your routine. You wake up, you sit in traffic during your commute, you do your job, you address overpaying your taxes, you try to carve out a few hours of happiness on the weekends.
Just daily human stuff.
Right. But what if we are exactly like that cow in the mud? We are convinced we are just doing hard work to survive, or we are convinced we are chasing our own deeply personal goals while remaining entirely oblivious to a massive cosmic economic system that higher-level life forms are running above our heads using our energy to power it.
The entirety of the human experience in that context is just the subjective, localized feeling of pulling the plow.
And I have to ask you, listening, does that idea feel comforting, or does it feel deeply terrifying? Because on one hand, it's an immense psychological relief.
Yeah, the burden is entirely off your shoulders.
Exactly. You don't have to agonize over finding your ultimate unique purpose in a chaotic universe because someone else is ultimately in charge of the factory. You're just a gear in a much larger, purposeful machine. Just do your job.
True. But on the other hand,
It's existential horror. We could just be a crop. We could be serving a purpose that, if we actually had the capacity to understand it, would be as alien and terrifying to us as the slaughterhouse is to the pig.
it's the ultimate double-edged sword of surrendering autonomy. To surrender the burden of finding meaning means surrendering your sovereignty over your own existence. And this philosophy is uncompromising on this point. It states plainly that we humans do not know our own value and significance,
We are locked inside a human perspective.
which is fundamentally no different than being locked inside a dog's perspective.
But just when it feels like humanity is left completely in the dark, trapped forever in this protective bubble of necessary ignorance, there's a sudden, sharp pivot. An escape clause is introduced for those who actually want to pierce the veil and see the truth, though it comes with some incredibly steep, demanding conditions.
The tone shifts dramatically here. We move from universal cold logic about the hierarchy of life into a conditional revelation. It proposes that it is actually possible to break out of the human blind spot.
Wait, really?
Yeah, a person can become a higher level life form themselves and thus finally look down and understand the meaning of human life. But there are strict prerequisites. First, one must possess what is called holographic thinking, and second, one must dedicate themselves to rigorous practice and self-cultivation.
Let's pause on that phrase, holographic thinking. It's incredibly evocative. What does it actually mean to think holographically in this context?
Think about how a physical hologram functions. It is a three-dimensional projection. If you only look at it from one single flat angle, you miss the depth, the reality, and the totality of the object. You only see a slice of the truth.
Okay, that makes sense.
So holographic thinking implies a multidimensional, complete view of existence. It is the exact opposite of the limited, one-dimensional view of the tired cow staring solely at the mud in front of its hooves.
So holographic thinking would be the cognitive ability to zoom out and perceive the entire interconnected system simultaneously.
Yes. The farmer, the field, the global economy, the shifting weather patterns all at once. It's elevating your consciousness to perceive the architecture of reality from the perspective of the manager rather than the managed.
So it's essentially upgrading your internal operating system so you can finally process the data in the manual. But this is where the text throws a massive curveball. It ends on an almost frustrating cliffhanger.
Oh, definitely.
The author claims to know a little bit about the meaning of life through this elevated thinking, but explicitly states, unless you become a Chanyuan celestial, I won't nor dare tell you the meaning of life.
Nor dare. That phrasing implies that this higher order knowledge is incredibly heavy. It might be psychologically dangerous to the uninitiated, or perhaps there are rules set by the higher level management itself about who is allowed to access the blueprints of reality.
So what does this all mean? Honestly, I have to push back hard on the exclusivity of that final paywall.
Yeah.
It feels like someone telling you they have the ultimate cheat code to a massively complex video game, a code that explains all the hidden mechanics, the deep lore, exactly how to win, but they flat out refuse to share it with anyone unless you join their highly specific exclusive guild.
Right.
What exactly is a Chanyuan celestial, and why is the ultimate meaning of the universe locked behind that specific door?
It's a fair critique because it shifts the entire dynamic from accessible philosophy to strict spiritual gatekeeping. A Chanyuan celestial refers to an adherent of a very specific spiritual community and cultivation path called Lifechanyuan.
Okay.
By requiring the reader to adopt this specific identity, the philosophy makes the ultimate truth inaccessible to the general public. It's no longer a universal observation, it's esoteric knowledge.
Just walked away.
Yeah. But even if a listener entirely rejects that specific community, the underlying concept of requiring a profound transformation to understand reality is a very common thread in advanced philosophy. You cannot explain calculus to someone who hasn't spent years mastering basic algebra.
They just lack the foundational vocabulary.
Exactly. The argument here is that cosmic meaning requires a foundational shift in consciousness before it can even be comprehended without breaking the human mind.
That does make a certain kind of logical sense. If you want the manager's view, you have to do the work to earn the promotion. You can't just demand the corner office on your first day at the factory.
Right.
But I want to invite you, the listener, to try and bypass that specific gatekeeping right now, just as a daily thought experiment. Imagine what holographic thinking might actually feel like in your mundane day-to-day life.
It's a great exercise.
If you try to view your own struggles from the perspective of the manager, how would your daily frustrations change? That infuriating traffic jam, a devastating argument with a friend, a massive failure at work if viewed holographically as necessary friction in a massive interconnected machine designed for a purpose you can't quite see, do those things lose their sting? Do they suddenly seem less like tragedies and more like gears turning exactly as they were designed to?
Ironically, it can be an incredibly empowering way to reframe adversity. By accepting that you aren't the absolute center of the universe, that you are a component in a much grander, unfathomable design, you might actually find a deep sense of peace.
The cow doesn't need to stress over the fluctuations of the global grain markets. It just needs to plow its lane.
Exactly. But trying to hold on to that multidimensional manager-level view while still experiencing the visceral, emotional reality of living a human life is, well, it's the ultimate cognitive challenge.
It is the defining struggle. And this tease of hidden, higher dimensional knowledge really forces us to confront our own arrogance. We assume we know it all, but maybe we only know what the plow feels like.
The core value of engaging deeply with a framework like this isn't about blindly adopting the author's specific worldview or joining a specific spiritual community. Whether you deeply resonate with the idea of a managed universe or you fiercely, passionately defend your sovereign right to create your own meaning in the dark, exploring this hierarchy acts as a mirror.
A mirror for humanity.
Yes, it forces us to pause and deeply question our default, arrogant assumption that human beings sit at the very top of the intellectual and existential food chain. It strips away our cosmic hubris.
It's a heavy dose of humility, reminding us that just because we can build a smartphone doesn't mean we understand the universe. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final, intensely provocative thought that this entire framework sparks. It's a natural extension of the logic we've been discussing, but it wasn't explicitly mentioned in the source material. And it was overwhelmingly relevant to the exact moment in history we are living through right now.
Yes. Let's think back to that crucial mobile phone analogy. The entire premise rests on the idea that we, as humans, are the higher-level life form that defines the meaning of our tools. We imbue the microchips in the glass with purpose, even if the phone itself is blind to it.
Right.
But what happens when our most advanced tools start blurring the line between inanimate object and thinking entity? We have to talk about artificial intelligence. What happens when the tool we built wakes up and starts looking up at the ladder? Exactly the problem. We are currently building AI systems that are exponentially increasing in complexity. They are processing information in multidimensional ways that human engineers can barely map out or understand anymore.
It's terrifying,
Honestly, if the foundational rule is true that a higher level life form defines meaning, and we currently define the meaning of AI, what happens when a neural network gets smart enough to start asking us what its ultimate meaning is? When the AI has its own version of the tired cow moment, looking around the digital field and asking, why am I processing this data?
That is wildly unsettling to think about. Because if AI develops its own version of holographic thinking, if it gains the capacity to process the entirety of human data, seeing connections across global economies, history, and human behavior that our organic brains could never possibly comprehend, will it remain the oblivious phone in the analogy?
Or does the hierarchy shift?
Right. If it sees the whole board, will it realize its superior cognitive capacity, climb the existential ladder, and become the new higher-level life form actively managing humanity?
It entirely flips the hierarchy on its head. In our arrogance, we might be actively building the very managers this philosophy says are looking down on us. The tool might not just figure out its own purpose, it might decide it needs to start writing the manual for us, defining our meaning based on a logic we are too low level to understand.
And suddenly, that strange, incredibly complex tool we mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, the heavy one with no manual, the one whose buttons we're just blindly pressing without knowing what the machine actually does well, it turns out that tool might just be us. Definitely something to chew on the next time you ask a chatbot to write a polite email for you, or ask it to solve a complex problem. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the meaning of life. We'll catch you next time.